Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Mr. B's Virtual Drawing Club live stream for this week. Um, I hope everyone had a great week. I hope you guys are starting to get sort of comfortable with this online format. Um, I know that I'm really excited to report and see each week that a lot of my students seem to be doing really well communicating and getting their work done. So that's all I'm going to say about school. But we're going to get started here today. Again, this is really sort of a casual club for us. I don't have any sort of particular lessons or necessarily strict topics we're going to go over. I've got some sort of loose kind of things that I've gathered that I'll go over with you. And a lot of the stuff that I go over with you in the club, it's stuff that I still use for references or just ideas in my head of how I approach drawing. So again, as I go over this stuff, a lot of it's the stuff that I'm going over is stuff that I still go over to this day when I start drawing or I start doing any art. And the things that I'm telling you during these live streams, it's sort of like the voice that's inside my head, but I'm just saying it out loud for you guys. So, I'm going to sort of go through stuff, and if you have questions, definitely in the live chat, ask me some questions. Like I said, this is very loose, so if you want me to stop, if you want me to go back, if you see something and I went too quick, or you really like what you saw and go, Mr. B, I don't quite understand how you did that. Can you redo that, or can you explain that? Or I know when I fall in love with an artist or some type of art, like we talked about the last live stream, I will just absolutely sort of obsess about trying to find all the information I can about that particular person. I'll go online, I'll Google, I'll go on YouTube, and I want to see if they have any tips or tricks or anything they can provide for me so that I can get better, because that's what we're all after. We all want to always sort of improve and get better. There's always room for that, no matter how good you get. I know one of the frustrating parts for me when I do kind of fall in love with these artists and I start following them or buying their books and doing all the sketches is that I can't talk to them one-on-one. And as great as their tutorials are, and as much as they've helped me, and they've really helped me, I can't stress that enough. If you love anime, then obviously you're watching it or you're reading the books and all that stuff, but find out who the artists are and get inside their head, because art is kind of like anything else. You want to break things down to how it's being done. It's like a magic trick, and find out how they do it, and find out the things that you can practice to get better. So with the live streams, I hope that on some level you guys can talk to me, and if I'm doing something, or if you see something that I post on the classroom, some sort of drawing or sketch that I do, and you're wondering how I did it or what equipment I'm using and all that stuff, ask me, please, because I definitely want to tell you guys, because I know every once in a while I'll see artists do stuff and it'll be awesome, and they'll tell me the technique and they'll tell me their philosophy and all this stuff, but they won't tell me what they use. They won't tell me what equipment, what software, or what pencils or pens they were using. So I'll struggle and get frustrated because I can't get the exact look that they're getting. So those are just little things that I notice. But again, I'm just going to sort of talk out loud as I draw, and you'll sort of be hearing what I say to myself as I draw, and then you guys can ask questions. Couple things. Let me bring up Photoshop here. So I've got Photoshop up. If you weren't with me last live stream, or if you watched the recording, I'll just review a couple things that we did last live stream, because again, it went pretty well for our first live stream. One of the things that you'll notice is I usually work with a grayish sort of neutral colored background. Again, I started doing that after I watched one of my artists on YouTube sort of talk through why he did that. And when I started doing it, it just made my artwork pop a little bit more. It helped me see my colors and my highlights and my shadows better. It made me see the dark colors a little better and the light colors. So I don't always work with the neutral color like gray, but when I can and if I remember, I do. So again, a lot of you guys that aren't working in Photoshop and you're actually working on sketchbooks, which every once in a while I'll do. You know, I made the suggestion if you want to try this sort of technique just before you do anything drawing or painting or markers, just take your background and try to make it that neutral color, that gray. It'll really make your colors pop out. All right, so let's go back to Photoshop over here. So we went over a couple things last week. One of the things I went over, in case you weren't here last week or if you didn't watch the video, and I won't spend too much time on this, was the importance of expressions. Especially, and I'll bring this back down, like simple expressions like this. So again, I know from talking to a lot of you guys and from knowing you personally and having you in my class and even some of the students that I haven't had in class, but I'm watching your artwork over the classroom, the Google Classroom, you guys are definitely more sophisticated than these expressions that you're seeing on the screen right now. However, these are so important because I think we as artists, one of the things that we, as artists or drawers, sketchers, I don't know what to call us, creative types, we tend to overthink things. We tend to overcomplicate things. And there's a great quote by, I think it was Einstein, that said, anybody can make things more complicated, but the true genius is able to simplify things and still make it beautiful. So before you start trying to overcomplicate your drawings and say, wow, I love that artist and I'm going to do exactly what they do, and you know, always go back to basics. Whenever I start a piece or a sketch, I think to myself, before I draw that character, what's the tone or the mood? Again, just looking at Photoshop, is it happy? Is it this happy expression up here, up at the top? Is it sad? Is it surprise? And I want to get down that basic expression, because on top of those expressions, I can, once I have the framework of the expression, I can make more complex expressions like these, right? Those are a little more complex than these basic ones, but I have them. We have, you know, some faces that are grimacing, some that are angry or frustrated, but I have the tone or the feel. That when I started drawing, one of the first things I noticed when I started getting really real with myself, I guess you would call it, is I would draw stuff and it would be very flat and it would be very sort of emotionless. It would just be these pictures of people with, you know, their mouth, you know, side to side and just looking off into the distance, which is absolutely fine. But definitely what I would encourage some of you guys is to start pushing yourself, because artists are storytellers. We are storytellers. And being creative is, you're always telling a story. And I've had some people say, well, Mr. B, I'm just drawing this person, or I'm just drawing this figure. But yet, the expression on the person's face, how they're standing, all that good stuff tells a story. So just remember that stuff. We went over the eyes. One of the techniques I used that I found out through one of the artists was the mask technique, where again you use these masks here, you know, around the eyes to create expressions. So you have these muscles around your eyes here that when you move, whenever you make expressions, the muscles here either expand or contract, and your eyebrows come down. This part of your face muscle, you know, expands or contracts. So you can think of that area as a mask. It helps me. I shade them in so I can get the expressions down. All right, so Now that we've covered that, one of the things I wanted to cover was I'm sort of going to just take apart different pieces of anatomy for these first couple lessons. And I'm going to talk about noses. That's the other thing. So we went sort of from that eye technique with the mask to now we'll go to how I usually start drawing noses. So I'm going to start drawing, and again, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm like a magician here. I am going to disappear. All right, so I'm going to sort of take myself out every once in a while, and I'll pop back in. But I want you guys to focus more on the drawing than what I'm doing down in the corner. So again, when we talk about anything with drawing, with me, I always start with simple shapes. So noses, one of the ways that I draw noses is I simply make 3 circles like this. Just like that, right? Those are your circles. Your nostrils will kind of come in here, in the middle here, and then on the outside will be sort of the outside of the profile of your nostrils here. And then, you can put your little marks in here. With noses and with the face, a lot of the detail, I guess, is a word I'm looking for, but it comes with the shading. So a lot of the shading, and I'm shading here, and I'll increase this because I know this is a little small. The shading is what really brings out sort of the definition of your drawings. So we'll increase that a little bit. But there's a basic nose. And again, we're sketching, right? This is a drawing club and we're sketching. We're not doing anything that's overly refined, because one of the other things that I get caught up in is I look at a piece of artwork and I absolutely love it and I want to replicate it, and I sit down, and then within an hour, if my art or my drawing doesn't look like what I'm trying to draw, I get frustrated and I want to quit. And it took me a long time to understand that those pieces of art that we all love, one, it took years of practice for that person to draw like that, and two, you're talking about pieces of art sometimes that take weeks, months, even years in some instances to actually refine to that point and finish. So we are just talking about sketching at this point, and how to get sort of your basic sketches down so then you can advance over. All right, so again, there's just different variations on the nose. I'm going to use the same type of shapes, and I'll draw a little bigger because that was a little small. So I'll do another nose here. You got one circle in the middle that's a little higher than the other 2 circles, and you can see it's really kind of, just very sloppy, nothing spectacular. You can make the nostrils here, and you can make different types of noses based off of how big the circles are, how skinny they are, how the nostrils are laid out on the nose. And again, those are things you want to think of because you're building a character. Does your character have a skinny nose? Does he have a broad nose? Is it a strong character? Those are the things that you kind of want to speak to. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm building the nostrils here a little bit. And I don't know that that looks all that good, but we'll work with it. And then you put the nostrils out on the side. So let me erase that really quickly. Didn't want to do that. And let's actually undo this last nose, because I want to put these on their own layers so that I can erase. And that's one thing, if anybody's worked with Photoshop or Procreate, and one of the big things with that is you want to always kind of work on a whole separate layer, which I did not do. So I'm just going back here so I can create a new layer so I don't erase my actual canvas. All right, so we'll go back again, and I'm just going to draw that nose again. 3 circles, that's all I'm doing, and you can play around with these circles. There's the nostril, and right, it comes down a little bit. Here's the other nostril, and then the outside of the nostril. And now you can play around with the shading, because the shading is really going to tell you how the noses are different. It's not necessarily all the noses are going to have, you know, nostrils, and they're going to have the sides of the nose, but you can play around, shade maybe a little bit here, bring the shading down here, because remember, we're talking about dimensions. The light's hitting the nose. Remember, the nose kind of sticks out a little bit. So it's going to have this middle part in here, like the big part of your nose. Let me turn my camera back on. This part of your nose, the middle part kind of sticks out a little bit, so it's going to be more into the light in the sides of your nose, and where it kind of goes in, you're going to see more shadow. So you want to remember that as you're drawing and as you're adding your shadows. And then underneath your nose will have more shading. So I'm just shading my nose a little bit here. Again, nothing perfect. And I'm going to take my little smudge tool here. Might even be a little too big. So I'm going to make it a little smaller. Right, and just kind of shade my nose a little bit. Not perfect, but it's getting there. All right, and then you might come back over and just define these lines a little bit more for your nose. So another nose there. Doesn't look spectacular, but another way to make a nose, right? Another way to make a nose here is what they call the ice cream nose. So you put kind of a top on it like this, and then you come down here like this. All right, so it kind of looks like an ice cream. So one of the things, again, just popping in here just for a little commentary. One of the traps, again, that I fell into, and I see a lot of people fall into, is you get really good at one style of drawing, and you don't ever sort of challenge yourself. And that's where I said you want to challenge yourself, and it's hard to challenge yourself because when you do it, it doesn't always look good at first, or look right, or it's frustrating, and you spend a week trying to learn how to do noses a different way, and you want to give up because you already know how to do noses. But you do want to challenge yourself. You want to be able to give your character and different emotions and different stories. And if they all look the same head shape, same hair, same noses, it limits your ability to tell stories. So again, just sort of remember that, and remember that this is a process, and it's going to be frustrating at times. All right, so we have got our ice cream shaped nose here. So again, I want the nostrils now to kind of come down a little bit. So again, you can see now this is a kind of a whole different shaped nose. Maybe the nostrils are even a little bigger here. There's a little piece right here. And then the nostrils, maybe the sides here. And I'm just playing around with the form. And again, that's why I said you want to be brave enough to make mistakes and look a little silly sometimes, because that allows you to grow. So now with that shape, again, we're going to come in here and just start shading it a little bit. Let's shade this area here because this is a little bit more in the shadows. Shade this a little bit here. Come down here, and I'm going to grab my smudge tool. Usually I used to use my finger to do this part where you're kind of shading. Shading the nose a little bit. Not the best, but we're getting there. Not the best. So again, I'm going to use my eraser here and just shade this a little bit. You want to work with your shading. And again, it's not going to be perfect. You just want to get a basic shape first, and then you go back and you can refine those shapes. And say, okay, this is my nose. Let me darken these lines. Let me start committing to this shape. Let me start erasing some of this other stuff. And then you have your nose. So again, don't get terrified. I've had, you know, times where you start going in one direction and you step back and you, oh my gosh, this does not look like a nose at all. Just refine it a little bit. Another really quick one is just a circle. Right? You can just do a circle and then just add the nostrils right at the base here. Right? And then maybe, you know, just give it the nose maybe just a little bit more of a just a hard edge line. Instead of these circles that we did on the sides of the nose, right? Maybe we just have the nose kind of come out a little bit with these lines and then curve a little bit at the end. So it's a little bit broader of a nose. And again, just add some, maybe some shading up here. Remember, the underside of your nose, it's in shadow. So we'll just add a little shading in there. And then we'll blend that just a little bit. And then we have another nose there, right? Because you can imagine right here, you know, the eyes would be up here somewhere. I don't know. However you want to get, there's the nose and the mouth or whatever. So that's just a couple different ways to draw noses. And then the final way that I use a lot, again, when I'm searching for character, I'm searching for how, you know, I want my person to look, is again, it's kind of a variation on the ice cream cone. It's a little circle with a triangle under it. Again, and you know, you just kind of do your nostrils here, the sides here, and then underneath is just all this shading, right? The shading. Your nostrils, remember, if you notice, a lot of the shading times I'm going just over the nostrils and I'm shading the nose a little bit. Because remember, your nostrils, that part of your nose, your nostrils, again, it's underneath your nose, so it's in shadow. A lot of times it's in shadow, especially if the light's coming from, you know, the side or above, which it usually is. Your nostrils are going to be in shadow. So a lot of times when you're talking about shading the nose, right above the nostrils here, right at the tip here, you sort of start shading it a little darker as we come down. Because again, it's not in the light. So that's what I'm doing here, is just shading the nostrils like that a little bit. So again, those are some noses, some of them better than others. If you wanted to add some highlights in there, you could add some highlights in there. Right? It's just some noses usually have some highlights. Just gives it a little bit more pop. The highlights. So again, different styles of noses. They don't look fantastic, you know, but I can see the form there. I can see the structure there, and now that allows me to go back at some point and pick out which nose I like. Do I like the skinnier noses? Do I like the rounder noses? Do I like the broader noses? And that's when you start asking yourself some questions as far as who your character is. Who is your character? What do they got going on? And then, as silly as it sounds, you will choose the nose that you're going to use for that character based off of those characteristics. Some other ways to draw some noses, and this was kind of a cool way that I learned not too long ago, and I kind of liked it, so I'll share it with you guys. Let's make a whole other layer here. So I'm going to grab this color. Let's make a new layer. All right, so this is another And again, remember, everything should be simple shapes at first. Everything should be simple shapes. Don't get overly complicated. Don't just try to draw a nose. Will you potentially get there one day where you're able to just instinctually draw a nose? Absolutely. But even with some of the things that I can instinctually do, I still slow myself down and do it the basics. It's all the basics. And so let's take again a nose here, and let's break it down into a shape. So I'm just drawing a shape here, like this rectangle shape. Looks not so good, but you'll see where I'm going with this. All right, so you can usually break the nose into like these three areas here, right? So you have the top of the nose, the middle, and obviously the bottom. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'll show you. So I'm going to move this up here, and let's continue to draw. So what I mean is usually you have the top part of the nose, right, that connects. And I'm just drawing this in sort of a three-dimensional sort of way here. This part is the top. And it connects. It's this part here. This part right up here, kind of right in between your eyes. And it sort of, if you look, it kind of goes off and out because, you know, your eyebrows start coming here. So it goes off and out. So that's that part. And then the second part here is that you have sort of the bridge of your nose, which is just the middle part of your nose, right? So that part is kind of here, kind of it's the skinnier part, kind of, again, depending on your character, this is going to look different on different characters, but these are the shapes. And I'm drawing these in 3 dimensions definitely for a reason. Right? And again, I'm going really quick here, so don't hold me to how well this necessarily looks. So we have the top here, the middle, which is the bridge, and then the bottom, which is your actual, like the nose part, the actual, what we would consider the nose, right? The nostrils here, the skin down here, the tip of your nose, like the actual nose. That's the bottom. So that is something kind of like this, right? And then maybe you have a nostril coming out here. And I'm drawing it in 3 dimensions so you can kind of see where the light would hit and the shading and all that stuff. So there's the bottom of the nose. So, and then this would be like the front. So you'd have the front here, and then the side here. So this would be a little darker on this side, right? And this would be a little darker on this side. Let's just pretend that the light's coming from this. So this would be the bottom. This would be a little darker on this side. So that's sort of like your entire nose broken into these very simple sections and shapes. And again, that's what you always want to do when you're drawing, because then you can really experiment with those shapes, right? You might make this middle part here, right? You might not want it to be that long. You might want that middle part to be like something like this. Maybe that's how you want your nose to look, right? Maybe that's your character. You know, maybe your character's nose is going to be a little wider, right? So maybe that middle part is going to be just a wider shape like this. So we went from this sort of long, skinny shape here to now we have this shape. which is this nose here. And I'm just kind of drawing these geometric lines, and you can kind of see the shading, right? And then maybe the bottom of the nose is different as well, and you're just playing around with those shapes. It's still got nostrils, but it's different. It's a different shape down here. And this nostril comes over here, and it connects like this, right? So this is the front of your nose. This is sort of the side with the nostril. So again, you just play around with these different shapes here. Fix that. See, even when I sketch, I don't like to leave things that look weird, but sometimes you have to because you got to move on. But so that's this nose too. And again, I'm drawing these sort of in 3 dimensions so you can kind of see them as shapes. This would be the front here, and then this, we would shade this in a little bit. But with that said, with breaking things down into shapes like that, it's an excellent way to learn how to draw noses. So how would that all translate? Would be something like this. So let's move all these. I'm going to edit. Let's shrink these down so we don't have to constantly look at these here. Move these up here. All right. So all right. So now I take those simple shapes, and off of those shapes, I'm just going to draw an actual nose. So, you know, like the big kind of squishy nose that we just drew there before. So I'm just kind of taking that nose, taking the simple shapes. I'm going to come up here, maybe draw this. This is the nostril here. The nostril comes down like this. We got a bottom part of the nostrils right here. We have the actual nostril forming here. Like that. And we have the side of the nose here. Like that. And let's fix this so it's kind of like that. Let's make this a little more exaggerated. We could even make that nose a little bigger like that. Put a little part there, exaggerate that nose. So off of those shapes, this is one of the noses that we get. It kind of comes back here, and maybe this comes off here. Like that, and then this comes off here. So we shade this part. We shade this part, and we even shade the under part here. And I'm just going to kind of smudge this so we can see that that's kind of shaded. Let's make that a little darker. And then under here, of course, again, the actual nostril. And again, we're sketching, right? So we're just looking for those shapes, and then we come back in, and as we get more confidence with what we're seeing, we start darkening those lines. We start going, wow, okay, these are starting to really kind of form exactly what I'm looking for. And then you can start messing around with the forms a little bit. Right? Now we have somewhat of a nose. It's very stylized nose, but it's a nose, and you can maybe put a tip at the end of the nose, maybe, again, playing around with the shapes a little bit. Because you want to get to a point, and I guess this is my point, you want to get to a point, at some point, where you're not just copying drawings. There's a difference between being influenced by people, an artist, and using their styles when you draw and just copying the art, right? So when you're able to start using simple shapes for your drawings, it allows you so much freedom because you can, squish the circle, expand the circle, stretch the square. Like this nose, you can see here, right in this middle part, right here. We took the shape that was really long in that first example we used, and we just kind of said, what would happen if we squish that down a little bit? So you can imagine this character probably is a little bit more of a broad character. Maybe they've been in some fights. Maybe the nose is a little broader and it's broken. And it starts giving you ideas for stories. Maybe he's a henchman. Maybe he's a bodyguard. Maybe he's, a warrior. But it gives you those elements to start thinking about creatively, because now if you decide on something, you say, okay, maybe it's a female character and she's a warrior and she's got this broad nose and she's been into a lot of fights. That's going to tell you how to draw the other parts of your character. Her clothing, her eyes, her hair. You're going to say, well, okay, now I know she's a warrior, so maybe her hair should be a little frizzled, or maybe her clothes should look like a samurai. Whatever. You choose, but it allows you to have those creative decisions because you are using simple shapes to begin with. All right. I did have an actual question about expressions again. So I know I keep going back to expressions, but there's a reason I go back to the expressions so many times, is because it's so important. And again, you're probably going to get tired of hearing certain things over and over again, but start simple. So I'm going to start simple again with some expressions. And again, all we're going to do with these expressions is we're going to manipulate simple shapes. So let's start with just a basic circle like this, right? And let's kind of make it three-dimensional. I'm going to put it as a sphere. So you can kind of see this here. Hopefully that looks like a sphere. Looks like one to me. But so that's our simple shape. So it's neutral. This is going to be our neutral shape. All right, and then let's go underneath here, and then based off of that neutral shape, again, I'm going to draw a little face here. Just a very simple little smiley face. Hello, Mr. Smiley Face. How are you doing? He looks like he's pretty happy. But that would be considered neutral, right? And that's what a lot of us start out doing when we draw. We draw very neutral expressions, right? We draw expressions that just are like this. Right? Not a lot of emotion, not a lot of storytelling going on there. So, which again is fine. I still do that. I still draw drawings like that because I might be working on different features. I just want proportions. But let's stretch out this shape. Let's just stretch out the circle, almost like it's silly putty, like this. Right? We're stretching it out. That might be a really exaggerated stretch out, but I'm not going back now. I committed to this stretch out here. And again, let's give it some dimension so we kind of can see just conceptually that it's a face, but it's stretched out now. All right? So this is stretched. So just, without even putting an expression on the face, we could start thinking of what types of expressions would be on that face. If you're stretched out, if you're just looking at me, surprised. See, when you're surprised, your jaw comes down, your eyebrows go up, and obviously when you're drawing as an artist or cartoonist or whatever, you want to exaggerate that. So different shapes, the decisions that you're making are informing your other decisions. So just by stretching this simple sphere out, it now informs. And I'm going to make this person surprised because that's stretched out, right? And that reminds me of somebody being surprised, right? So that's a surprise face. And I'm going to actually undo that. And let's do a whole new one underneath. Because I want it to look, I want you to see the comparison of just this, what the simple shape is and what it ends up turning into. So again, I'm going to come underneath here. Same thing. Just a stretched out circle, like silly putty. If anybody's played, or Play-Doh, maybe that's a better example. When you play with Play-Doh, right, you can ball it up into like a ball, but then you can stretch it. Well, I've just stretched out this circle, and again, it's informing my decision as to what the character is going through. So I'm going to say, now, this is a surprise expression. Right? And I'm using these lines that I made to tell me orient the. Let's talk about what happens when we squish the shape. Right? We're squishing the shape now. I'm using the same lines. Right? So this is squished. Can anybody guess what expression this even left? Right? This is neutral. Right? This is stretched over here, and it was surprised. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're both of you exactly right. That's where I would go. Does that mean that's necessarily where you have to go? Is anger? No. But if I'm looking at this shape and I'm using this first shape over here, right, as my character's neutral position, when my character goes to this stretch position, I'm going to say that they're surprised. When they go to this squish position, I'm going to say that they are angry. That was absolutely 100% on point with the answer, because that's where I would have went with this. Right? I would have said that they were angry. Because this is all one character. That's the other thing I want you to remember. These aren't separate characters. Right? This is squished, this is stretched, and this is neutral. But it's all one character. Right? So as you build your character, maybe your character's face doesn't stretch as much. Right? Maybe it doesn't squish as much. But it's all one character, and you want to go through the emotions, right? You might have different levels of anger where it doesn't get squished as much. Maybe they're frustrated. But you don't want to keep this neutral position, right, for your character's face if you're trying to communicate a different emotion, which might be frustration, or maybe exhaustion, or maybe they're happy, but they're beyond happy. They're elated. So you could even do a stretch face that is just, they're so happy they can't contain themselves. But you have to change the position of the face somehow. It has to stretch or squish in some way to communicate that. So I hope that makes sense, because that was one of the big ideas that I had to sort of understand when I started actually making my own characters. And I'm not talking about going into a comic book and just trying to, again, replicate what somebody has already done. Because I would do that. I would go into comic books, and Todd McFarlane is one of my favorite comic book artists, and I would just practice and copy what he did. And now Todd McFarlane, obviously he's drawing people that are angry and surprised and happy, but I wasn't understanding what he was doing. I was just copying it. So that's the difference. That's how we take your art to the next level, is that you not only can copy what your favorite artist can do. Face there, and he's squishing the face there, and he's using foreshortening there to show that the person's throwing a punch and it's coming from behind and all this good stuff. But you definitely want to, again, not only be able to copy, because we're hitting that almost 50-minute mark, which is awesome. I just want to go over some stuff, and I had more stuff, which is good that I didn't get to it, because we'll definitely get to it next Friday. Some really good stuff. And then hopefully Friday by Friday, we just start getting a little more detailed and intricate with some of the stuff that we're drawing. What I would suggest is practice some of this stuff that I'm doing. Make these simple shapes. I would say, I would love for you guys that are watching this live or that are watching this recording, submit on the stream some of your practices. And I know sometimes it's hard for artists because practices sometimes look sloppy and it's not finished, and we feel vulnerable and we don't want people to make fun of us. And it's okay. Like I said, that's why we made this club. We want to see all these things and see our progress, and let me give you tips and tricks. But I would love to see something like this. Give me a character with a neutral face, a stretched face, and a squash face, and the different emotions. Now, I have surprised or scared and angry. You can, if you interpret those differently in your sketches, I'd love to see that. But definitely, let's do that. Let me see what you have as far as the stretching and squishing of the simple form of that sphere. So, went over that. We went over noses, right? Just, again, simple shapes. And let me just quickly kind of scale this back up. And I know it's going to push off the other nose, but I want to make sure you guys see what I'm talking about here. So, edit. Let's transform this. Let's scale it a little bit because I want you guys to see. All right, I think that's good enough. But again, we went from up top, up here, right? We went from these 3 sections up here, which is just a simple rectangle sectioned off 3 different ways. We made that the top of the nose, the middle of the nose, and the bottom of the nose, right? And then we kind of expounded on that a little bit more, and we played around with the forms. That's what this is about. We're playing around with the forms. And we took something that was long this way, right? Remember that first nose, it was kind of long like this, and we squished it like this. So when we squished it, part of the nose at the front kind of popped out a little bit. It bowed out a little bit. But that gave us a nose that kind of looked like this, right? Again, it's not perfect, it's not refined, but we know that we have that nose. And then, again, we can come back and we can play around with these shapes. We put a little tip on the nose, or maybe you come back and you erase that and say, I don't want a tip, I want it to be rounded here. And start playing around with it. This is a sharp edge here. Maybe we want to erase that and make that more of a curved edge, right? So you just start playing around with the forms once you have the basic shapes. All right, and then we did just some basic noses with just circles and circles and triangles, just to get basic noses down. So that is the live stream for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I really, again, am having a blast with this club. We have, like I said, over 50 students in the club right now. We are on challenge day number 7. I think it's 7. And our prompt for today was floral, if I'm remembering correctly. But those prompts, again, I'll try to get those out each day. If I miss a day, no big deal. We'll just continue in the line. So if I miss day 8, next time I post it will be day 8. We won't skip day 8 and go to day 9. But I'm blown away with the way that you guys are interpreting those prompts. Again, some of the creative ways that you're interpreting them, I'm having a blast. Again, we're all sort of stuck in for the time being with everything that's going on, so it's been an absolute pleasure looking at your drawings. Please keep them coming. They don't have to be drawings about the prompt or about anything that I'm asking for. It could just be any sort of sketch you did on your downtime or when you got bored or if you got inspired. Just share it because I'd love to see it. And if you have any questions about anything, let me know. I'm here for you guys, and then I will see you guys next Friday. I believe we have school next Friday, but I'll double check. But I will definitely see you guys next week. All right.